my friends. In January of 1941, Franklin Roosevelt stood before Congress and did something unusual for a man in his position. He looked past the immediate crisis. The crisis was immediate. Europe already burning, the Pacific coiling towards explosion. He looked past it all and described the world he believed was worth fighting for. Not just an American world, a human world. He called them the four freedoms: the freedom of speech, the freedom of worship, the freedom from want, freedom from fear. Four simple declarations that a decent civilization ought to guarantee every person on this earth. He was not a naive man. Franklin Roosevelt understood exactly how ugly the world was. He was already moving men and material, already watching Java and Sumatra and the Malay Barrier with the eye of a man who knew what their loss would mean. He knew the cost of what was coming. He named the four freedoms anyway, not as fantasy, but as destination, a moral mop. And that was 85 years ago. I want to revisit the map today, not to celebrate how far we've come, but to take an honest accounting of where we stand. Because every one of those four freedoms, every single one, is under pressure right now. Not in the abstract, this week. The freedom of speech. Roosevelt understood that this freedom was the foundation of everything else. Without it, the others cannot be defended, because you cannot name what you cannot say. We have not lost the freedom of speech in the legal sense. The First Amendment still stands. But something has happened to the commons, the shared space where free people argue and persuade and change each other's minds. That space has been poisoned. Not by censorship exactly, but by volume, by the deliberate manufacture of noise, so much noise that the signal disappears. When a lie travels 6 times faster than the truth, when algorithms reward outrage over accuracy, when the loudest voice is always the angriest voice, free speech can become a weapon turned against itself. You can say anything. And because you can say anything, nothing means anything. The founders imagined a free press as the immune system of the democracy. They could not have imagined a world where any person with a device could broadcast to millions, where foreign powers could seed division through thousands of false accounts, where truth itself became a matter of tribal allegiance rather than evidence. Freedom of speech was meant to protect the truth teller. Today, it is most loudly invoked by those who wish to draw out the truth teller out. This is not what Roosevelt meant, not what the founders meant, and we ought to say so very plainly. The freedom of worship. This one Roosevelt framed expansively. Not just the right to practice your own faith, but the right to do so without fear. The right of conscience, the right to locate your moral authority somewhere beyond the reach of the state. Religious minorities under pressure on every continent. Faith communities weaponized, not as a source of conscience, but of compassion, was the marker of tribal identity. Who is us and who is them? Draw lines of mosque and church and synagogue and temple. The ancient human tendency to make God soldier in our particular army. And here at home, the weaponization of our faith in politics, not faith as consciousness, not faith as the voice that says we must care for the poor and the stranger, not faith as the thing that humbles us before something larger than ourselves. Faith as a cudgel, faith as a flag, faith as a way of declaring who belongs and who does not. I am an ordained man. I've spent my life in proximity of the sacred, and I will tell you plainly, that is not religion. That is politics wearing religion's clothing, and does damage to both. Roosevelt's vision was a world where every person could seek God or not seek God, according to the dictates of their own consciousness, without government or a mob telling them how to do it. We are not there. We are moving from there. Freedom from want. This is the one thing that should shame us the most. In 1941, hunger was a genuine scarcity problem. The world did not produce enough. The infrastructure to move food efficiently did not exist. Famine was still partly an act of nature. This is no longer true. We produce enough food today to feed every human being on this planet, every child, every grandmother, every person in every corner of every continent. The earth has provided. Agriculture has advanced. A single American state can grow enough corn to sustain populations that FDR could not have imagined. And yet, 800 million people go bed hungry. Children die of malnutrition in 2026. Not because the food does not exist, but the political will to deliver it does not exist. Because corruption intercepts it. Because wars destroy the infrastructure that moves it. Because the economic arrangements we have built reward the consolidations of abundance rather than distribution. This is the one that is entirely our fault. Not an act of God, not a failure of the earth, a failure of human systems, human choices, human priorities. Roosevelt called the freedom from want a global aspiration. 85 years later, it remains an aspiration. While we possess right now everything we would need to make it a reality. This is not a policy disagreement. This is a moral indictment. Freedom from fear. I saved this one for last because it is the root of the others. Roosevelt defined specifically a world reduced to the point where no nation would be in a position to commit an act of physical aggression against any other neighbor. An armed world, a world organized for war, is a world organized for fear. And a world organized for fear cannot deliver the other three. 85 years later, we are watching a war footing develop in the Persian Gulf, in the Middle East. This week, 3 separate acts of gun violence on American soil. The daily drumbeat of threat and counter-threat, sanction and response, posture and escalation. Fear is the common thread. Fear of the other. Fear of losing. Fear dressed as strength, which is the most dangerous kind. Because it looks like resolve when it's actually panic. Nations and people are generally strong, but do not lead with fear. They lead with purpose. Roosevelt knew this. He named fear itself as the enemy. Not in 1933 only, but in 1941, when fear was entirely rational. When bombs were falling on actual cities and fear had real teeth. Even then, he refused to organize his vision and future around it. Because a future organized around fear is a future that is already surrendered. My friends, 4 freedoms, 85 years, and we are still fighting for every one of them. I want to be honest with you about what that means. It means the work is harder than we thought. It means the arc of history does not bend towards justice automatically. It bends because people put their hands on it and pull. But I also want to be honest about this. The fact that we are still fighting is not a sign of failure, it's a sign of life. Dead things do not struggle, only living things that push back against the current. America is a living argument. It has always been a living argument. The four freedoms were not a description of what was, they were a demand for what must be. And every generation that takes them seriously, that refuses to let them become mere words on a page, is doing the essential American work. We, the people, not the powerful, not the comfortable, not those who have already secured their own freedoms and would prefer to stop there. We, the people, all of us, the full, complicated, arguing, striving mass of us, we are the ones entrusted with this. We are the ones who decide whether these four freedoms remain a living demand, become a museum exhibit. Roosevelt could not finish the work. No one person can finish the work. That's the point. That this whole design of this republic, that this work belongs to the people, and the people are always becoming, always unfinished, always capable of more than yet they have done. I believe that on the evidence of history, the evidence of what ordinary people do when they decide the common good is worth the effort. I believe that. Freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, freedom from fear. Not yet. Not fully. But not abandoned either. Not on our watch. Thank you. God bless you. And God bless the United States.